Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 151. If you're looking to improve your understanding of photography, you're in the right place. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you click like, and tell your friends about it as well. And we also, just a wee reminder here that because this is episode 151, we actually have 150 previous episodes all here on this YouTube channel that you can go and check out whenever you wish. So yes, welcome. Today we're going to be looking at a bit of feedback on a couple of photos sent in. Meanwhile, here we are live on YouTube. If you happen to be watching live and not the recording, make sure that you leave me a comment. Let me know you're here. Say hello. Tell me where you're from. Tell me what the weather's like. Join in the chat. It's always a bit of fun to kind of feel that I'm not actually just presenting out into the middle of nowhere with nobody actually listening. If you happen to be watching the recording though, and anything interesting occurs to you, or you would like to ask any questions, then you can either leave a comment on the video below, or join the Facebook group. We have a Facebook group also called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, which you can you just type that into Facebook. You'll find us easily enough. I can see we've got a couple of people in already, so let's take a quick look at the comments here. So April says, hello everyone from a cloudy Long Island, New York. Maggie says, hello afternoon from a wet Castle Douglas this afternoon. And it is, if I look out the window here, it's a bit grey. Actually, the word I think is dreich. It's a good Scottish word, dreich. D-R-I-E-C-H or E-I-C-H, not entirely sure. But it kind of feels how it sounds. Grey, miserable, bit damp, just dreich, really. Who else have we got? Robert from says, howdy all from sunny Texas. I'm glad you made it back from Texas last year. Last week it was California, I seem to remember. Andy says, hey everyone from Hertfordshire. Janet says, hello from rainy Mississauga, Canada. Meg says hello everyone, and Don Quilty says hello from a dreich Northumberland. Right, okay, so dreich has spread. Right, yes, so we have people in, we have photos to look at. We have I don't think it's going to be a hugely long episode today. I've had 2 images sent in. However, I think you may well find them interesting. So what we're going to do is, hang on a sec, Rosemary's joined us, says, greetings from sunny Pacific Northwest, something went wrong with the spelling there. Anyway, Pacific Northwest, anyway. Washington State, I know that with Rosemary. Don Quilty saying he wishes he was in Texas. Yeah, I think we could probably do with a little bit of Texas warmth as opposed to dreich northern part of Britain here. Yes. Right, so yes, what was I going to say? So yes, today we are... Oh, Pat's joined us. Says hello from Minehead. And that's down in Somerset, so that's the opposite end of the country. So it's brightish there. That's a bit nicer, better to have a little bit of better weather. Okay, so yes, where are we? Will I get started? Lots of people coming in and saying hello. That's lovely, though. Right, so where am I going to start? Yes, I think what we're going to do is today I'm going to start with Sandra. Now, I know Sandra can't actually make it here today. She's already sent me a warning ahead of time, but she will be watching this on catch up. But I thought what she did was, it was really quite interesting, because actually this one from Sandra came in a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember when we had the ground level challenge? Well, that's what she originally sent me an image in, but was struggling with it, and that sort of set me up with the idea of maybe we should think a little bit more about this. And kind of tackle it a little bit. So let me show you the image that that Sandra sent. So ground level, and you go, okay, ground level in a car park. I can see some cars here. There's a little bit of we've got these kind of perspective lines leading up the car park to a white van at the end. Is that particularly interesting? So I was looking at this, but then she said, on Tuesday, I went into Birmingham city centre to take some photos, and I was in a car park that was on the side of a hill about 1 in 5, or a 20% slope. And so what you're talking about is it's on a slope like this. Now, that's steep. You know, half these cars here, you'll just be praying that their handbrakes hold out. If one of them further up was to go, it would just kind of create a domino effect and sort of cause quite a lot of damage down the rest of them. She said, which when I was looking through the camera lens looked really dramatic, and I thought this will make a really good photo for Kim's challenge, the ground level challenge. However, when I looked at it on the computer, the ground was flat. And this has made me think about camera distortion. I thought it was just my poor photography skills not doing justice to beautiful landscapes, but if it is in fact camera distortion, is there anything you can do about it while taking your photos, or does it all have to be done in Photoshop? I attached the car park photo so you can see what I'm talking about. So the distortion that Sandra is referring to is, if you remember, kind of about 2 or 3 weeks back, she sent in a photo from her trip in Iceland, and she was using a wide angle lens, and the mountains in the distance, which she remembers as being really big, had only appeared as really small. And part of that problem was when you're using a wide angle lens, the stuff in the distance looks even further away. And so what could be quite majestic mountains were just this kind of sort of thin line on the horizon. And so what we did in Photoshop then was we actually copied the mountains and stretched them up, just to kind of make them look a bit more like we remembered them, and to kind of counteract the natural distortion that happens with a wide angle lens. So when Sandra was looking at this, she was wondering if it was suffering from the same problem. However, it isn't. This isn't about camera distortion. This is all about perspective and relationships as to where you are. So the interesting thing about this is this is a slope. This is a 1 in 5 slope. So this is quite a steep slope to be parking your car on. It's one where you hesitate, where you put your handbrake on, and you probably leave it in gear as well if you drive what Americans call a stick shift, I think, to make sure that even if your handbrake fails, the engine will lock and you'll not roll backwards or forwards. But it's just not showing up. Why isn't it showing up? So I was sort of trying to play around thinking of ideas, and I thought probably the best thing to do is show you a couple of examples. The problem that we primarily have here is we don't have a reference point for the steepness of the slope. Now, when Sandra was there standing on this hill, it's very obviously a hill, because you've got all your reference points around you, including your own sense of balance. That if you don't lean forward a fraction, if you try to stand upright, you would in fact be sort of leaning back at 20 degrees and quite possibly fall over. So your body's doing the correction, your inner ear is getting its sense of balance. But the camera, two-dimensionally, also not taking in the larger scene and at a very specific angle, isn't giving us that sense. So what I thought I would do is, just yesterday, just to kind of sort of see what it would be like, I grabbed 3 small jars of coffee. These small jars of coffee are Meg's coffee, my daughter Meg. They're flavours. They're instant coffee, but they've got flavours and what have you. And she's really got into them. Anyway, all I really needed was something roughly about this big, and they seem to fit the bill for what I needed. But what I want to show you is, I just went out. These are quick phone cameras, unedited, nothing fancy. This is just about principle rather than photographic skills. And what I want to show you is this. So this is the 3 coffees looking down from above. Now I've popped across the road here to Market Hill, a little bit of grass. There's a little bit of a rise above the kind of the cut grass, and there's a wee slope that I decided to put the coffee jars on. And the question is, can you tell? And actually, no, from here, from this angle, you can't tell. You can't tell that these are on a slope. If you suspect it might be, could you tell which way it was sloping? Is it sloping upwards, downwards, left, right, according to our perspective? And actually, you can't really tell. If anything, if I look at this, I would say it looks like it's maybe sloping slightly to the right, but that's actually more to do with the wide angle distortion on the lens of my phone camera. So you can't tell. Well, even though this is on a slope, there's no way of knowing because you don't have an extra reference point. So let me show you a slightly different angle. So I come down a little bit lower. Can you tell now? And I would say no, you still can't tell whether it's flat, whether the slope's going up or down or left or right. There again, you're missing that reference point. So let's try again. Coming from the side. So here we can see, now you can see a bit more of the coffee for those who happen to be interested. Beanie's Coffee, I am in no way sponsored by. However, if Beanie's or anybody employees happen to be watching this and would like to suggest it, I'm sure we could probably do some kind of sponsorship deal, because Meg goes through this coffee at an incredible rate. So yeah, the three, I just happened to grab 3 off the shelf. Meg's got about a dozen of these different flavours: caramel popcorn, Easter cream, and choc coconut were the ones that I managed to get hold of. Anyway, that aside, the fact was we still couldn't see. You still can't see at this point which way the slope might be going. In fact, I would say at this one, it maybe feels like the slope is coming towards us or even down slightly to the left, but you can't tell again. So let's try another angle. Let's try and get the horizon in. Now, okay, what I've now done is I've done proper ground level photography. I've come right down and I've put my phone at grass level. You can see the grass in the foreground here, and these are all sitting in a line. Can you now tell which way it's going? Well, there's a bit of a tree popping up here, so is that kind of giving us a bit of a clue? Possibly. So you might say we're going up the slope, but can you tell how steep this slope is? And I would say not. Looking at this photo here, if you were saying it was on a bit of a rise, then you would say it's just about on the brow of it. We've got the daffodils have now passed. We've got some dead daffodils, or past the daffodils. All the flowers are gone, withered flowers. Just here, tree where the leaves haven't quite come out. In fact, actually, out today for my walk, the leaves have just started coming out on the tree. So what a difference a day makes, as they say. But here we could, so we're still not sure of what the angle is. So finally I move round, and now, so all these photos have been taken exactly. I haven't moved the coffee jars at all. All these photos have just been taken exactly the same setup. All I've done is change from when I was shooting above, shooting from the side, shooting from below. It's only when you've got a recognizable horizon line that's actually sitting at an angle that you can tell compared to the slope. So if we go back to this one, where you might think it's on a slope, but even then it's still not that obvious, but you can't tell how steep it actually is. This is probably the comparison to this one, where it might be on a slope, but you can't tell how it is. Even though there's a kind of a horizon line up here, there's not an obvious kind of sense. So that's kind of falling into the same category. But it's only when we go to here, and now we can see the roofs of these buildings. We know these buildings, the roofs are going to be level. In fact, actually, it's probably, if we look at the horizontals in this is tilted fractionally to the right. So it might even be just you might tilt it a degree or two to the left. But basically, we know the trees go straight up. We know the buildings are straight up. We know the roofs are going to be pretty much horizontal. So it's only now can we really tell how steep the hill is that these are sitting on. And that's really what I wanted to say, is the fact that you've got to have another reference point. I will, just for a little bit of bonus, show you what happens if we tilt this. And this is a bit of fun as well, because now what we've done is we've tilted the camera so that the Beanie's coffees are level. They are straight, and now the far off horizon is at the funny angle. And this one really, I think, kind of plays with your mind. It messes with your mind a little bit. Because the background is, the whole thing's got to be tilted because of the background. But at the same time, because the foreground does look fairly flat with the coffees on there, your brain wants to accept the fact that it's flat. So sometimes you can have a bit of fun. So I just wanted to point this, or I did this one just to point out that if you are on a hill, or you have a place with a hill, but there's some interesting buildings or trees or something else in the background, sometimes it's worth playing around with that. Play around to fool the eye. Play around with this kind of illusion notion, where what you do is you tilt the slope so the slope looks like it's the flat horizon, and see what's happening in the background. And suddenly you find other buildings are sort of sitting there in this sort of diagonal way. So that's really what I wanted to show you there. A little bit of fun, certainly at the end, with that last photo. But the whole point of this is that the photo, you might be there and it's very, very obvious that you're on the bottom of a hill. But unless you have something to show you that you're on the bottom of a hill, if I take this phone and I tilt it, now from that angle you can very much see that it's tilted. But if I'm looking up at that angle, it's not so obvious. If I, how much the tilt is. Now you can see a tilt here because you know that this should be square, but if you know it's that size, your brain kind of starts to work it out. But then if you didn't see a reference point at the beginning, it's less obvious, especially if you're kind of looking up the length of it. So that's the main thing, Sandra, is to understand that the slope on its own isn't enough. You have to have the other reference points, and those cars weren't enough of a reference point. I don't know what you would do in that particular situation. I don't know where else you could stand in order to make sure that that slope was really noticeable. But that's in essence what the problem is. So it's not about camera, it's not about lens distortion, it's all about relationships to other objects and lines, and particularly kind of the verticals and the horizontals and side on. So I hope that all makes sense to you. Right, I can see a few more messages, comments here. What have we got? Anne's joined us, also says hello from Texas. April says, I can't tell how steep, but definitely I can see the difference. Meg says, thank you for chatting about me with with coffees, Dad. I do enjoy my coffees. Meg does enjoy her coffees, this is true. April says, interesting flavours. And Rosemary says, an interesting problem, Sandra. Helpful resolution, Kim. Thanks. Okay, excellent. I hope you found that one interesting. Right. Now, before I move on to the next one, a quick thing I just wanted to make a point of, which is, if you're going to get your, I've had a couple of issues with images being sent in this week. Well, first of all, I did get one sent in very late last night, and that's too late. If you're going to send in images for feedback, then I say Saturday at the latest. And really, when I say Saturday at the latest, I kind of mean Saturday morning at the latest. Friday is preferable. Earlier in the week is more preferable to that. There's a reality for me, which is I need to have time to be able to look at the photos, work out a response. If necessary, something like Sandra's bit, where I've gone out and I've actually taken extra photos in order to illustrate the point that I'm making. If I'm going to help you with understanding your photography, I need to know what the problem is, and I need to have time in order to work out the best solution for you. So, little reminder that if you are sending in images, the earlier the better. The other thing is, I did get one where somebody sent me an image with absolutely no sense on what they wanted. It just said feedback, and that was it. And I've not included it today because I don't know what kind of feedback somebody's wanting. It's really important that, because it might be that you send me an image and the most obvious thing is that it was taken in very low light and it's a very noisy image, and so I can say, it's very low light, very noisy image, try and do this, this and this. But it also might be that you already know that that's the problem, and that wasn't really the problem, and what you were wanting to know about was the colour balance, or you were wanting to know about the compositional rules, or you're wanting to know about a particular element in it, or something like that. So it's not necessarily going to be obvious that I'm going to see the same thing that you are. So it's just a wee reminder. It makes my life an awful lot easier to give you the feedback if you can tell me what it is. So in essence, it's just trying to remember, I'm here to help you. I can help you best if you let me know how to help you. And then that's great, because I enjoy doing that, and then you get the help, and then anybody else watching it gets the help too. But also the other thing is with this is, because of those two things, it meant that today we only have 2 images put in. There's options here for you to learn. There's very few places on the internet where you can get really good feedback on your photos, and not just feedback on your photos. If you want to ask questions, anything photography related, I will do my best to help. It's what I really enjoy doing. But again, I can't help if you don't ask. Okay, so stick your photos in, ask your questions, and I will do my best to help. So that aside, then let's move on. Let's move on to the other photo, which I wanted to, which came from Anne from Texas. And Anne sent in a photo of her dog Trevor. So now Trevor, as a rescue dog and all sorts of sort of various problems, disabilities. I think Trevor's blind. Is that right, Anne? I think, as well as the fact I think has the lower jaw missing. But for all that, everything, every bit of feedback I've ever seen Robert and Anne put up on about Trevor is an incredibly loving, happy dog. But she goes on to say, so here's a photo of our dog Trevor. It's really difficult to get a good photo of him. And I took this picture and thought I might be able to darken the background and make it into a portrait. So let's show you her original photo. So this is Anne's photo of Trevor. You can see, very fluffy, friendly dog. And what she did, so she said, so this was the original picture, and she thought I might be able to darken the background and to make it into a portrait. So what she did then was she converted it to this. She said, I made 2 copies, darkened one, and then erased over the image to hide the background. Any suggestions on techniques on how I could better accomplish the darker background? So there's basically Anne's taken, this is your original photo. She says it's difficult to get a good photo of Trevor. She got this one. She felt this is a better one than most of the ones I get. How can I kind of turn this into a portrait? And so she's converted it to black and white, which is probably good because when we notice this, the day glow colours of the collar and the lead strap, which here bright yellowy green, grab all the attention. After that, it's the pink of Trevor's tongue, which grabs the attention, as well as the bright patch where the sunlight's hitting the hair. So we're not necessarily getting a real sense of Trevor's expression or full sense of personality because there are these other bits going. So converting to black and white is certainly a good way of a good start. But then what she's done is she's darkened down the outside, but it becomes very kind of obvious. There's a kind of almost quite a strong line of light here and then dark here. So it's like a kind of over heavy vignette, and the hair disappears out. And so but we've also got the fact that, this strap here, although she's darkened part of this part here is also really bright and kind of still brighter than a lot of the image, and so kind of grabbing some of the attention. So it's a tricky one. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, I would say, if you're going to try and take a photo, try and get a good portrait of Trevor, mostly I would say, if possible, get down to his level. I would say even with this one, you're still potentially just a bit too high up. So Trevor is in somebody else's arms, is being held there, and you're sort of still kind of above him, taking the photo, looking down a bit. And I think, especially given the fact that Trevor's hairstyle looks like he kind of flops over the eyes quite a lot. If you're wanting to get those eyes, then coming down even more to Trevor's level, get eye level with Trevor and take your photo from there. Now, if Trevor happens to be held by somebody else, that means you only have to go down a little bit. If you're talking about where Trevor's at home on floor, you need to get down to ground level and take the photo from there. I think whenever you're doing pets, or you're doing likewise when you're doing children as well, is getting down to their level is really where it's at. That's one of the key things that will elevate your portraits before you do anything else, is just actually being eye level with your subject, rather than looking down on them. So in terms of tips for taking photos of Trevor in the future, that's the number one tip that I would give. As for this picture, you have difficulty with the fact that there is a lot around him, and like I said, we don't necessarily have the kind of angle we want. But what I would do, let's just open this with Photoshop for a moment and see what is possible. So here's our picture of Trevor. So I'll just duplicate that layer. First of all, and actually what we'll do is we'll do what you did, we'll crop in. Now I think you know my feeling about the idea of crops, that I feel you either go landscape or you go portrait or you kind of go square. The not quite square just always kind of makes me feel a little bit in the same way that not quite straight horizon. So we take a square crop, and then we kind of move Trevor around until we kind of feel out, okay, we've got the bits in that we want, we've cropped out the bits that we're not really so bothered about. So there we've got our composition. So there's a number of different ways we can kind of look to convert this now to black and white. If I go to the channels, there's things like the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel, which we can see kind of change emphasis on different bits and pieces. Or what I think we will do here, we'll go back to layers. I'm going to go into Photoshop and into Camera Raw. Okay, now Camera Raw, Lightroom does something very similar here, and most I think Affinity or various other editing softwares will do something similar. And what I can do here is there's a little option up here, it says auto and black and white. So if I just click auto, that's lightened it a bit, but I'll take the highlights down a touch more as well, I think, because they are kind of blowing out a little bit on the top of Trevor's head. But there's also an option here that says black and white. So I can click that and that goes to black and white. Now, normally I talk about just not desaturating because it's fairly flat. But in Camera Raw, and I think in Lightroom you have a similar thing, by going to black and white, you can scroll down and there's a black and white mixer. So if I click down here, I can move the reds up and down. Now, at the moment, only his tongue is in red, so that's not making a lot of difference. Oranges, there's very little in the way of orange. Yellow. Now, you start to do the yellow, you start to notice this kind of greeny yellow down here. And if I go greens, there we go. You see, I can drag that down and that actually gets rid of a lot of the brightness that's there, that's grabbing our attention. I don't necessarily need to pull it all the way down to make it black because that actually is now so black it's grabbing our attention the other way. So we're kind of trying to move it down into a neutral tones so that it's not grabbing our attention anymore. Do you want that yellow? Aqua. Now the aqua is kind of touching into those sort of slight green bushes in the background, so you could maybe take that down a little bit. Blues, she's got a blue jumper, blue background. You can drop that a bit, but we've got to be careful. If I go too far, then you'll actually notice it's become very, very sort of pixelated, noisy up there. So I would be slightly more careful with the blues, only drop it slightly. Purples, a little bit on the bottom of her sleeve. Magenta. Now we're back into tongue territory. So what we're doing here is trying to say, too dark a tongue, you can't see. Too bright a tongue is grabbing all the attention. So we're just going to get, the tongue is part of who Trevor is. So we're trying to get enough of it there to notice, but not for it to be the first thing we notice. Now that we've got that, let's click OK in that. So this gives us our basic black and white conversion. However, we are still having a problem with the idea of it is bright up the top here. The face isn't really grabbing all our attention. Let me duplicate this layer. And I think one of the things I would say is there's always going to be a problem with the fact that Trevor's eye is quite dark here and is lost in amongst everything else. So I would suggest you brighten the eye. And for that, something like if you use the dodge tool, I set this to mid-tones. I've got this at 5% or something like this. And then just do this a few times. And what it's really doing is just kind of lightening up the highlights a little bit like this. Now it is making a little bit noisy, so we kind of have to be slightly careful on it, but you can tell the difference between that and that really does just help grab the attention a little bit more, so the eye stands out a fraction more. Now the next thing is about the darkening the background. What do we do here? Now we could create a separate layer, we could grab a black brush and we can kind of paint around like that. And, you know, and then sort of maybe lighten it a little bit, something like that. And you can kind of do that, but it's again what we're back to is that problem that we said back at the beginning with this version here. You can really kind of see it around the top. It's not necessarily helping there. I think another way of doing this instead is I like quite often if I'm playing with this, I would go to the curves. And if you go to the curves, now, if you drop the whole thing down, that's kind of not quite working. Also, there's a limit how far it's going there. I would first of all go up to the top. Oh, hang on a sec. Let me try that again. Right, I'm going to pull this down, and I'm using my guideline. Is this top corner here. right? I want to get that down, not black, but fairly dark, or darker than the surrounds. And then I'm going to create a curve, that kind of, so you get this bend. Now, this has become dark, but what we're trying to do is trying to kind of naturalize it. So what I'm now going to do is, using the mask part, make sure we've got black here, drop this down to something like, I don't know, 30% or something like that. And then I'm going to do this quite big, so that what happens is the feathered edge of this just keeps it quite natural. And now I just apply it once, apply it twice, just feather it around slightly, come down here a little bit, narrow this down. I think I can't actually read what's on the collar there, but I think the fact that that little bit of collar there is worth doing. But you can see, but basically what we start doing, maybe let's go back up to a slightly bigger, and I just kind of start slowly applying this in places. Well, look, be careful I don't overdo it, but we're just trying to, I can maybe go a little bit lighter here because this is already black at the background, so that's okay. And there, I think what happens is we've now got a sort of slightly more convincing, it's not feeling so harsh, there's not such a sort of strong edge between the darker background. Now we've got something like this. I think if we copy all those together and paste them into a sort of joined merged layer, and then maybe take this back into Photoshop, then I think we can kind of play around with the last couple of things. That maybe what we will do is brighten it a little bit more, except for the fact that I'll take the highlights down a fraction again. I think we could even add in a little bit more of a vignette, just to kind of darken those corners a little bit more, and then maybe actually play with the clarity a touch. Just brings out, you kind of got to be careful because the text, there's a lot of texture here. What about if I do the contrast? Contrast works quite nicely, I think. Maybe bring the shadows up a little bit so I can get a little bit more Trevor. Yeah, something like that, I think. So we've gone, so what we've done is we've gone from this to brightening the eye, to doing the curves down, and then doing a final kind of bring it up to place. And I think really, Anne, that this is, within the photo you've got, this is kind of where we're at. I think when we look at this, this is kind of giving you the best version of Trevor from the photo that you've got. Like I say, the other real way about this is, I think, is to start from just lower down. If you just sort of lowered yourself about 6 inches, 9 inches, maybe a foot, something like that, and been more on eye level with Trevor, I think that could have been a more interesting photo. What you might have been trying to do, of course, is avoid something in the background, but that's always the problem, is that you're trying to find. But you really, if you kind of don't get the best out of the face because the background wasn't right, then the photo isn't working, and so you need to move the dog around, you need to move the person holding the dog around, you need to move over to a different place where there is potentially a background. If you're trying to get elevate from beyond just a kind of quick snapshot of here's my dog to here's a good portrait of my dog, then it's a case of taking the extra time to think about what the background is doing, your height, where the light is coming from as well. I mean, again, in strong sunlight here, part of what we've been battling against is the sunlight is bouncing off the top of Trevor's hair, and it's creating a very bright patch and dropping his eye and other parts of his face into shadow. If you've been in a place with a slightly more neutral, softer light, just into the shadows or something like that, where the light was all around, it would have allowed you to then you wouldn't have had to kind of be fighting against that bit so much. But overall, I mean, I think we end up with something like that, which I think is a more acceptable kind of photo. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense for you, Anne. Amazing dog, and is great. Great to see that you're taking photos of him. So yeah, hopefully the suggestions that I've given will help there. So where are we? A few more comments here. Nadia arrived and said, hi everyone. Anne said, yes, he is blind. We're very happy. That's good. Don says, Kim, what is the best, most convenient method to send image files to you? Okay, good one. So if you are generally speaking, anything up to about 20 megabytes, I think, if you're only sending the one, but all the total number of files, 20 to possibly 25, Google Mail will accept, so I'm fine with that. If you're wanting to send bigger files than that, then either WeTransfer is a good one. There's a couple of people who use Rosemary's fond of using WeTransfer. Robert sometimes sends me things where he uses Google Drive. If you happen to have Google Drive, you can upload your picture there and put it across. Another one is Dropbox. So if you're wanting to send me either a large file, a large raw file, or a number of files, because of whatever the question or image is, then WeTransfer, Dropbox, Google Drive, any of these will work. And to send them to kim@kimayres.co.uk is probably the easiest one to do. So hope that. I look forward to seeing what you're going to send. Don says, love Trevor. April says, great advice about the angle. That's useful. April says, I like that finished product, Kim. Fiego's joined us and says, oh no, I missed. Oh, well, I'm afraid you'll just have to kind of, when this is finished, go back to the beginning and start. Fiego says, also, and greetings to everyone from India. Robert says, this is a great technique, very natural. And also thinks it's more natural and a good technique. Don says, that's very useful. Thank you for the masterclass. Smug points due to you. Thanks, Don. Robert says, edit captures Trevor's personality nicely, a kind of low-key poodle, and says, great edits, but also minimise the distractions in the image. Pat says, Trevor looks sweet, and Rosemary says, yes, WeTransfer works seamlessly for sending large files. Yeah, I mean, WeTransfer will say you can send up to 2 gigabytes. Now, I'm hoping nobody ever needs to feel the need to send me 2 gigabytes worth of files, but anyway, that's the amount of space that you have for it. Right, okay, so little reminder that if you find these podcasts useful, entertaining, interesting, and you would like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Or if you know anybody who works at Beanie's Coffee, ask them if they want to do a special a sponsorship deal for my daughter. For me, probably Illy. That would be a good one. Anyone know anybody who works high up in Illy Coffee? I would happily take a sponsorship deal from them. What else are we going to say? Oh yes, make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the little notification bell that you get somewhere to be notified of future episodes. Invite your friends along as well. And of course, don't forget to like the video as well. YouTube's algorithms do prefer it if people actually click like on the video. So, where are we? Yeah, that's pretty much us now. Like I say, a shorter one this week, but make sure you get your images in for next week. Next week we'll do more feedback. Put your images in, have a think about what kind of feedback you want from the images. I will do my best to help. You need to let me know what your sticking points are, and it's okay for you to not know. I will just need to put. I sometimes think I really need to get this point across, because sometimes we can feel a bit embarrassed about admitting we don't understand whatever it is, whatever aspect of photography it is. That's okay. Nobody knows absolutely everything to absolutely top level degrees. If you don't know, you don't know. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. Then we find out. So I can help you. So it doesn't matter. It can be a technical thing, what you do with your camera, what the settings are. It can be a compositional thing, how to lay out the image on the page or on the screen. It can be about lighting. It can be about story. There are no limits as to what you can ask. And also, even if you understand some of these things, but you're not sure how it applies to your particular photo, then that's what the feedback session is for. Send me your image, tell me what your sticking points are. Like Sandra there, she's got a picture of a hill. It should be obvious. She can see the slope. Not sure why it isn't coming through in the camera. We're up against this kind of thing all the time. So thank you very much to Anne and to Sandra for both sending in their images and giving us a chance to, really get in and play and explore our understanding of photography. And thank you to everybody who's taken the time to leave a comment. And I will see you all next week. Don't forget to send me your images. Have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye.